Charles Kuralt wasn't really raised there. The only reason his mother, Ina, went there was to give birth was because it had a hospital. Born at James Walker Memorial Hospital on September 10, 1934, she was 7 months pregnant. Following this, she and Wallace took their child back to the tobacco farm where her parents lived in Onslow County. Farmland spread out over 100 acres. Baby Charles spent his early years there. There was no water, light, or sink inside. They used a gourd that was hung on a nail to get water from a pump on the porch. Fireplaces made heat. But Charles didn't say anything. By using flour paste and newspaper, he made kites. He put tobacco string around them and flew them so high above the barn that he joked that God could read the news. He also made slingshots out of dogwood twigs and used straw to tickle Venus flytraps. His family shifted places. At first, they were in Washington, North Carolina. All right, Stedman. Then Atlanta. In the mid-1940s, Wallace Kuralt became head of the Department of Social Services for Mecklenburg County, and they finally moved to Charlotte. There was something new in every town, and young Charles became crazy about radio. He began calling minor league baseball games and presenting a music show when he was only 14. Charlotte's Ways Radio. He won a local writing prize that same year for a sports story about a dog that got in the way of a baseball game. From 1945 to 1948, he went to Alexander Graham Junior High, where his writing teacher, in Baton, taught him. He had a sidebar in school newspaper called The Kaleidoscope. After that, something amazing took place. Despite being only 14, Charles won the National Voice of Democracy contest in 1948. There were only 4 winners that year. He traveled to Washington, D.C. on a $500 grant and met President Harry S. Truman in the White House. In colonial Williamsburg, he gave his winning speech while standing where Patrick Henry had yelled, "If this be treason, make the most of it." After the fact, Charles said that his message was meant to have the same brave American spirit. He was one of the first winners in the country since the event began in 1946. Everyone saw how smart and talented he was at this point, even though he was still in high school. He worked in the tobacco fields with his grandparents in Onslow County during the summers. He would gather leaves when it was harvest time. They would be given to a person called a stringer and tied to wooden sticks to dry. Aside from hanging them in wood barns, his favorite part was driving 50 miles to the Kinston tobacco market. When they went on trips, his grandma Rena would load their wagon with cured tobacco, hitch up the mule, and depart. Those rides, she would tell him stories about thieves who robbed farmers on their way home from the market. That's why wagons used to go places with riflemen in front, she said. Charles would pretend to be their guardian and keep an eye out for made-up criminals. They helped him build the stories he told on TV later on. There were also things he saw that most white kids didn't. Charles grew up in the segregated South and went to schools where only white people went. But he saw what was going on with black people. There were a lot of angry police in Charlotte. A black newspaper in the area called the Charlotte Messenger wrote that police were hitting people in the streets. Because his dad worked as a social worker, he saw even more unfairness. Charles remembered everything. He never preached politics on TV after a certain point, but he always made sure to tell stories that gave people who were often forgotten a chance to speak out. The way he stood up was that, were he a student at Central High School from 1948 to 1951? People at school thought he was the best writer there was. Back in 1951, his friends chose him as the most likely to succeed, but he was already doing well. When he was 14, he was a radio host. Back then, he won the Voice of Democracy award and got to shake hands with a U.S. president. He also got $500. Things like that are worth more than $5,000 now. Real writers started to notice how well he edited the school papers. He started working at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1951, and the things he did there were amazing. He majored in history and worked at a number of radio stations, such as WNC and WCHL. His grades were good, and he covered football and basketball games, made radio reports, and did well in school. He joined the St. Anthony Hall Literary Fraternity, which showed that he was more than just good at reading news. His friends were amazed at how he could do so many things at once. He wouldn't miss a beat if he wrote a full play, recorded it, and then went to take a history test. As a teenager, 1953, he had a part-time job at Ways Radio in Charlotte. We weren't working in college. He worked as a broadcaster and called baseball games with the same smooth voice that made him famous later on. It sounded like he was in your living room, talking to you. People loved Charles's stories more than his data-driven speeches. The station got calls from people who liked him. The bosses couldn't believe he was only a teenager, but he was special. An easygoing voice that made people feel like they were being heard. Understood. He was in charge of the student newspaper, the Daily Tar Heel, by 1954. There was nothing scaring him. He knew that writing angry articles against racial segregation would make a lot of people angry. He was called a commie by some. Politicians from the state called him names in public. When the university banned drinking in fraternities, Charles made fun of the rule by writing an opinion that said, "Pierre, meet Fred." He did this by saying that the school's policy was like a French campaign against wine. He did more than just tell the news. He used his wit to stand up to power. He got his degree in history from UNC in 1955. It was important to his family that he go to law school. It would have been safer to do that, but Charles had just won a national award for a radio show about the history of North Carolina. Business people from all over the country took notice because it was that good. Teachers were surprised when he turned down law school to become a full-time journalist. It had a lot of danger. They weren't very wealthy. But in 1957, 2 years later, CBS News hired him. The 23-year-old became the network's youngest reporter ever. Back in 1959, Charles Kuralt went to New York to work at CBS's main office. He felt like he was dreaming. Ed R. Murrow, who was his childhood hero, worked in the same building. After filling in for a writer on Murrow's weekly show for only a week, Kuralt was quickly moved to the TV news team. CBS was desperate for new people to work on the show. After many years, Kuralt finally accepted it. He said, they needed people to be on the air badly. That was the beginning of TV news, which was new and dangerous. Besides writing short stories about American life, he worked on shows like Dimensions on health. He had to write short, clear radio pieces in the middle of the night for his work. He learned how to quickly tell strong stories under pressure, which would affect his whole life. Around 1960, something strange happened. Kuralt was only 25 years old when she became the first host of the primetime show Eyewitness to History. The show changed its look, and he quickly became its trademark. He helped write about the important arguments between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. That moment changed TV for good. They were watched by an amazing 77 million people. At the time, that was more than 60% of all living Americans. A well-known magazine called Variety said he was young, good-looking, and sure of himself. That didn't make him seem fake or dramatic. People believed they could rely on him. He was learning how to be a TV reporter while covering one of the most important political events in U.S. history, which made it even more amazing. He was given a much bigger task by CBS in 1961. As their main Latin American reporter, they sent him to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He had only been 20 years old yet. He was supposed to work in 23 countries. There really were risks. There were uprisings, riots in the streets, and constant fear. One bad move could hurt you or make things worse. Some of the places he had to report from were countries were falling. Violent events were reported every day. He held that job until October 1962, which was the month of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which made things even less safe in the area. He showed he could handle chaos with cool in every report he sent back. He wouldn't stay a reporter forever. People were beginning to depend on him. He went back to the U.S. in 1964, and the country was already much different from before. People spoke out. There was war, and there were fights for human rights. Not far away from Kuralt was the action. The way he talked about Vietnam was scary. He remembers that he and his crew had to follow a group of Vietnamese Rangers on one job. There was an attack. In our group, half of the people he said died, he said. Luckily, we didn't get killed. This is a Christmas special he made from Vietnam in 1965. A man was killed in front of the camera in a very sad scene. He went to Selma, Alabama, during the marches for civil rights as well. People felt things when he talked to them quietly, which made them stop and think. He wasn't even 30 yet, but he was already taking pictures of the most dangerous and sad times of the decade. Kuralt was worn out by 1967. He was sick of having to race other reporters to get to big news before they did. Something else was what he wanted. He told people at CBS that he had to leave the building. His idea wasn't logical. Oh, he said, how about no work at all? Imagine driving down the Great American Highway for 3 months without stopping to see what I could see. He got ideas from Travels with Charlie, a book by John Steinbeck. At first, CBS didn't think much of the idea. For some reason, they thought it was funny. One boss did give him a chance, though, only that the prices should be as low as possible. The trip began in the fall of 1967 in a rented motor home with Kuralt and cameraman Isidore Bleckman. Things weren't fancy. The couch cushions were dirty. The fridge only had pop and beer, and peanut butter and crackers were their main food. Each morning, they perused a map and chose a place some 100 miles away. Later, they drove. A simple thought turned into something important in history. They took 6 different motorhomes on more than 1,000,000 miles of trips over the years. 500 pieces were made in 48 states. In every story, Kuralt found something that most news shows had missed: honesty, kindness, and value in the lives of regular people. On October 27, 1967, the very first episode of On the Road played. In Jacksonville, Vermont, George and June Butler made maple syrup. It was beautiful what George said on video. He told them that they could get sound and color, but not smell. Also, the smell is one thing. The sap might be getting into your system through osmosis. They did not do it to get paid. This is what he meant by the real joy of being in the woods. The mood for the whole series was set by that story. Straightforward, honest, and friendly. It made people fall in love. They had been on the road for 50,000 miles by 1968. And talk with an Iowan bricklayer who is 99 years old was a moment I will never forget. He had work to do. The numbers went up because of that news. No one believed it. They kept showing up in Kuralt's life. He talked to a runner who is 104 years old, a man whose house was made of beer bottles, and a woman whose string was the biggest in the world. He said that they found mountain climbers, wrestlers, jugglers, tattoo artists, gandy dancers, sheep shearers, bagel cooks, horseshoe players, rodeo riders, people who make sorghum, and people who collect seashells. Each story was a quiet celebration of life. In 1970, when producer Shad Northshield came, the show would never be the same again. He brought editing tools for phones, so they could work on their videos while they were traveling instead of having to go back to New York. The show went on without stopping, saving time and money. It was a huge step forward. You can now stay out later, drive farther, and still meet CBS's deadlines. This actually made On the Road even better, and Kuralt felt free. If they hadn't made that upgrade, the show might have finished a lot sooner. And then, in 1972, Kuralt made one of his best pieces. It was about Californian hobos who were old and rode trains. These guys had been living on the rails and in camps for decades, away from society. All but Kuralt remembered them. He listened to them, spent time with them, and treated them with respect. Those words earned him an Emmy. He knew that life as a hobo was ending for good. Those days were quickly coming to an end as highways took over. These people's stories were saved by Kuralt. The 1970s were a great time for Charles Kuralt's On the Road. Though he had already been across America, these years were when everything came together. A small group of him and his team filmed more than 600 short stories. Across the country, people put down their plans to watch. The times when there was peace and quiet during a time of war, riots, protests, and other chaos were even called 2-minute ceasefires by Time magazine. But Kuralt showed something different from what was in the news, which was mostly about bloodshed and fighting. His actions showed others. His actions gave me hope. There were no roads for him. It made him angry. I remember him saying that roads let you drive from coast to coast without seeing anything. Therefore, he chose the side roads. He used up 6 motorhomes by going more than 1,000,000 miles. Folks adored him for discovering the true essence of America. His second Peabody Award was given to him in 1975 for this work. He was known as a bicentennial historian and told how well he told the stories of the people and places in America. There was one story in 1974 that jumped out more than the rest. And Ira Perkins, a teacher at a small school in Montana, was mentioned. It had been 53 years since he last taught in that little classroom. In the beginning, in 1933, during the Great Depression, he only made $60 a month. That yearly cost was just $420. He never went away, though. For example, he taught the grandchildren of his first classmates. Getting the kids up and teaching them good manners every morning by dancing was his hobby. When there was only one classroom, one grade would do math and another would read history. Not complicated, but it did the trick. All of that was done with quiet respect by Kuralt. In 1975, he started something even bigger. In honor of America's 200th birthday, A wagon train was going from Valley Forge to California. They got Kuralt to join. It was turned into a new show called On the Road to 76. Those 50 states were on his list of places to visit. Beyond a story, it was something else. He lived with them, rode with them, and wrote down everything. The judges at Peabody gave him another award. He showed that the spirit of the pioneers was still alive. They admired how he found deep meaning in small towns and brought life to places that had been lost. In 1976, he informed us about a person who was blind and was attempting to climb Mount McKinley. The biggest mountain in North America is now known as Denali. Despite not being able to see, the man climbed. Nationwide, Kuralt demonstrated what true bravery looks like. People were glued to the screen. In his words, heroes were not to be found in movies or in politics. They lived next door. Many other episodes were based on that one. It was about determination, hope, and the normal people's quiet power. Their 10th anniversary was in 1977. That's why Kuralt showed something as simple as a barbershop in a small town. All sorts of things were talked about there, though. Politics, sports, and sadness. There was more to it than a haircut. People got together there. In the same year, he also said that when he first told CBS about the idea, he only asked for 3 months. 3 months on the road with no big plans or stories to write. It was hard for him, but he did it for 25 years. The motorhomes stopped working. It was cold and tight where he slept. They didn't mark the roads. Despite that, he never stopped. He started to focus on rare animals in 1979. The very first show of CBS Sunday Morning aired on January 28, 1979. Kuralt stood in Cobscook Bay, Maine, in the cold winds. Talk about hawks and owls. Said that if you are lucky and in the right place, one day you will look up and see an eagle flying. Looking at it will stop your heart. Few of them were still there. Individuals remembered that phrase. Nature wasn't the only one. It was an alert to take better care of the land. They had 30,000 bald eagles, which was the most in the whole country at that time. Kuralt made it clear why that was important. He began something new that same year, 1979. CBS gave him a completely new part. His show would be on Sunday mornings from a studio in New York. Nevertheless, he did not give up the road. It was a busy week for him, but on the weekends he flew back to host the show. His life went on like that for 9 more years. He finally gave up while traveling in 1988. He was hurting because of it. He was tired after 21 years of being on the move all the time. Some people said that he filmed an episode in China in 1985. That's not precise. That being said, he did cover China's democracy riots in 1989. Worrying. Kuralt wasn't afraid of bad news, even though some people thought of him as a soft explainer. His first trip to the North Pole was with Ralph Plastid in 1967. They got a Tandies on snowmobiles, and it got as cold as 40 degrees along the way. He wrote about the Congo Revolution in the 1960s, but he later said he got tired of the reporters competing with each other. He picked the road because of that. A Life on the Road, his autobiography, came out in 1990. It quickly sold out. However, it wasn't just a collection of lighthearted stories. Truthful, when he was recording the Northern Lights in Alaska, it got down to 60 degrees and the cameras froze. He almost died of cold. He talked about how dangerous the road could be by himself. He said there were times when they didn't talk for weeks. He was sick from food in Louisiana and had to stay in the hospital for 5 days. He almost got bitten by a rattlesnake in Arizona another time as well. In fact, he said there were times when he stopped just to scream at the sky. It affected him. It wasn't always easy to travel. Whatever happened, Sunday Morning did great. He was in charge of it when it won 3 Peabody Awards in 1979, 1982, and later. A 90-second movie of nature was one of the most well-known parts of the show. Just the sounds of the seasons changing. Filming each one took 3 to 5 days. The group would wait for hours at a time to get the right lighting or animal movement. We wanted to do it right, Kuralt. If one word didn't sound right, he'd do voiceovers again up to 12 times. He picked every story himself and turned down dozens every week. On Sundays, people got up early just to watch. By the early 1990s, more than 6 million Americans were watching. He gave up his job on April 3, 1994. He was very young, only 59. It was widely expected that he would receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996, but it did not happen. Despite that, he got other awards. Also, the Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism was given to him. He was added to the Television Hall of Fame. He maintained his speed. 3 times a week, short stories from his new show, An American Moment, will run. He also led the show I Remember, which talked about important events in history. There was a hearing in New York City Hall on June 1, 1962, where Charles Kuralt married Jennifer Suzanne Patty Baird. The service was over in 1 minute. It looked like an easy, quick wedding between a rising journalist and a smart lawyer to everyone who was there. Thanks. PT weren't aware that this moment would be the start of a 35-year lie. Charles got divorced from his college love, Sari Guthrie, in 1956, just 2 years after they got married. In his new relationship with PT, he promised to make a life for himself on Manhattan's Upper East Side. But in 6 years, things would start to fall apart in a way she couldn't see. Lorraine Kuralt met Patricia Shannon in Reno, Nevada, in 1968. Patricia was known for her work in the community. She was a divorced mother of 3. After Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy died that summer, there was a lot of anger in the country. Kuralt had just started his new show on the road on CBS, which he used as an excuse to travel a lot. Things changed when he met Patricia. After delivering 32 roses to her door, he took her to dinner. In a motel room, they talked all night. That event began a secret romance that lasted 29 years. Within 1969, Charles Kuralt had assisted Patricia in separating from her husband. He temporarily moved her and her kids to New York and then to Colorado so they would be far away. During the same year, he began giving her money. A great deal of it. 10 years later, he gave her about $600,000. Nowadays, that's worth more than $4 million. His generosity allowed her to study in London, start a landscaping business, and buy houses in San Francisco. Kuralt had another family on the other side of the country while his former wife took care of the money and social events in New York. She bought 20 acres of land in Montana in 1970, next to the Big Hole River. He and Patricia built a house there. He told Petey it was just a place to fish, but every September he wouldn't be seen alive for weeks. Not on your own, but with Patricia. He even spent $180,000 to turn an old classroom nearby into a writing office where he planned to retire with her. Later, he added 90 acres to the land. It was more than just a place to hide. It was a fully second life. His letters to Patricia's kids were signed Pop by 1971. He enrolled her son in softball, taught her daughter how to drive, and generously paid for their college. He took them on vacations, paid for their school, and treated them like his own children. Every night, he called Patricia, and every 2 to 3 weeks, he went to see her, even when he was very busy with work. Fans of CBS saw a nice, normal person telling stories, but behind the scenes, he was living a huge lie that affected every part of his life. That wasn't the end of him. He started taking Patricia's son with him on CBS jobs and even to party conventions in the 1980s. He strutted his stuff like a son. At the same time, his real wife was in New York by herself and thought he was just working hard. At one point, he even gave Patricia a house in Ireland worth $50,000 as a secret gift to help them live the life they had built together. A New York hospital was killing Kuralt from lupus in June 1997. He was practically immobile. He told Patricia in a letter just 16 days before he died, "I'll have the lawyer visit the hospital to make sure you inherit the rest of the place in MT." If it came down to it, it was his last chance to protect what they had made together. He had secretly given her $80,000 3 months before to buy 20 acres of land, acting like it was a normal sale. He was making it clear now, though. It was his wish that she would have the whole Montana land. It was July 4th, 1997, when Kuralt died. Patricia Shannon brought the letter to his funeral. Everything fell apart at that moment. Although she had been married to him for 35 years, PT had no idea. It was then that she found out her husband had another family. He had given them a lot of money, bought them land, sent their kids to school, and spent the holidays with them while she stayed at home and didn't know anything. Patricia's letter would be the main evidence in a court case that greatly altered events. The Montana land, which is now worth more than $600,000, was the center of a very nasty court case. The fight included Kuralt's girls from his first marriage after Petey died in October 1999. Shannon said in court that Charles had raised her children as if they were his own. He had given her a song for Christmas one year, and she read it. There were promises of pearls, a suit, a sweater, and him. The words "my life" were at the end. Both the poem and the letter were used as proof. In her favor, the Montana Supreme Court made a decision on March 22, 2000. The estate lost almost $1 million because they had to pay $350,000 in taxes on land they no longer owned. They didn't get anything from the property, and the public picture of the man they thought they knew was ruined. Then the last blow came. Patricia Shannon wrote an autobiography called Charles and Me, which came out in 2002. In it, she told everything. She talked about the songs, the calls, the trips, and how Charles had taken her son on cross-country CBS trips. She talked about how he gave her an Irish house and let her spend money for many years. She told everyone that Kuralt had lied to everyone, not just his wife. The person the U.S. believed to be telling the truth had been living a huge lie.